Hi folks, let's talk about Azure for the web front-end developers. Mission of Microsoft is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And it's absolutely applicable to the case Azure and web front-end developers. Azure is here to help us to achieve more with actually spending less efforts. And I'll show you how and why. I'm Maxim Salnikov. I work as a developer engagement lead in Microsoft Norway, and this is my Twitter handle, WebMaxRU. Let's stay connected on this social network. I tweet mainly about web platform, about cloud, about all awesome technical things. Super briefly about myself. I build on web for more than 20 years, since late 90s. And I'm a big fan of developer communities and technical events. I even organize a couple of them myself. And of course, I do lots of technical speaking, blogging, I create content for the developers. And also, this is another side of my personality. I'm a hobby music producer and DJ. Why do I ever talk about this here and now? Well, this is actually how my story of Azure Front-End Apps started. So, as a DJ, I was missing one particular tool, counter of BPM, beats per minute, or tempo of the music. So when I, for example, improvise something using a Launchpad or MIDI keyboard, and I want to mix it live with some pre-recorded music, I want to have some control over this BPM count. And yeah, so I put my web front-end developer hat on and I created this tool. It's fully driven by web platform, so it works in any evergreen browser, on every platform, any operating system. There is no backend, at least for the core part. It's just pure JavaScript web front-end application. And also I created a PWA, Progressive Web App, out of this. So you can even install this, so it behaves like a native application and you don't even need internet to use this tool. I gave a name, I call this BPM Techno. And what's next? It's on my local host. It works for me, it helps me to produce and mix music, but I definitely have some other plans for this tool. First and foremost, I want to share this with the global community of musicians, of DJs. I think that this small tool will help them to do their job and their hobby. So number one. Number two, I have some extra features in my head how to improve this application, so I have a small roadmap what to add there, and these features are mainly related to, let's say, infrastructure part of this. So it's simple backend to gather stats and maybe user account to, for example, gather statistics for every user, something like that. At the same time, I really want to focus myself only on front-end development. So I don't want to be, I don't want to spend too much efforts in understanding how to distribute this application over the globe, how to build the backend from scratch, spin up virtual machine or application platform or whatever. No, I want to write JavaScript code. It's okay if it goes for the backend, like for Node.js driven backend, but that's it. This is where I want to stay. And I started to think what could be, let's say, dream offering for me as a web front-end developer from some particular cloud vendor or any cloud vendor. And I came up with some criteria. First, the hosting itself should be fastest and super reliable, no questions at all. At the same time, we are talking about global community of musicians and DJs, so it totally makes sense to have this application as close as possible to where they reside, where they produce their music. So geo distribution is a very good option. Also, this application is classic single-page app, driven by React to be even more precise. So there is some support from web server needed to correctly process, for example, navigation requests. So this also should be included. And of course, since I gave custom name to this tool, BPM Techno, I want to register domain for this and I want to connect with the application. Plus, no doubts, it has to be served via secure connection, and after all, it's driven by service worker, and service worker is only working under HTTPS. At the same time, I don't want to deal with the hassle and spend some money on buying my own SSL certificate. It should be just included in the offering. Next, how do I actually go this journey from updated code for the application to it being distributed over the globe, over multiple servers on our planet? And here, I don't want to spend any click, any extra effort on doing this. I write the code, I push it to the repo. That's it. This is all I want to do. I definitely don't want to learn too much about DevOps. I'm not going to become DevOps engineer in the nearest time, at least. I want to stay a front-end web developer. At the same time, sometimes I experiment with new features of this app. Maybe they are not ready for the production yet, and I want to have the way to showcase this to my friends. And after all, of course, it all starts with my own testing, maybe automated one. So I need some test environments. And again, I don't want to spend not even too much efforts, but any efforts on creating these environments. Okay, and last but not least, I mentioned about some extra features. And if you talk about backend, I want to focus myself on writing the code. JavaScript code for Node.js driven API endpoints. Plus, if we talk about authentication and authorization, well, I definitely don't want to dive too deep into creating all own infrastructure around this, to build, to implement my own custom solutions on logging in and out. I'm completely fine with what identity providers like Twitter, GitHub, and others give me as help. And of course, it all should be connected to the hosting platform I select. Plus, if you talk about backend stuff, API, building API and authentication, it might be challenging somehow to debug everything locally, right, before pushing this to the server. So I need some nice tools for doing this locally on my machine. Quite a serious set of requirements, but one more. As this is hobby project, I'm not going to commercialize this, and I want to invest only my efforts, not dollars, into its development. I want to get everything for free, at least for the beginning, at least before my application becomes super popular with terabytes monthly traffic. So I need quite a good free tier. And you know what? I found this solution. It's called Azure Static Web Apps, and my colleagues from Azure engineering team are working on that. And yeah, to be honest with you, I also contribute to success of this service. And this is officially my favorite service from hundreds of services delivered by Azure Cloud. Okay, so I did this project. I successfully deployed this project. It's under successful maintenance and development by me now, and I want to share my story with you, so you could reproduce these steps for your hobby or personal or your work, your business project. It's also absolutely relevant. how to start. You know what? I decided not spend too much time on that side of the story. Why? Because it's not simple. It's just trivial. I strongly recommend you to start with the installation of corresponding VS Code extension. It's called Azure Static Web Apps. Once it's in your VS Code, you just click plus button, create new static web app while you reside in the folder of your front-end application, and then super simple wizard, couple of steps, you are there. You can achieve the same using Azure Portal. And by the way, if you don't have Azure account, during the demo I will show you the link where you can register it for free and get some dollars as a voucher. At the same time, do not forget that Azure Static Web Apps include generous free tier, so you don't need to spend money on that, at least while your project is in sort of personal mode. I mean, the traffic is not about gigabytes and terabytes. To start with Azure Static Web Apps, in these wizards, they are both in VS Code extension and Azure Portal. You just point to the code repo, and these days I believe 100% of the projects are in this or that code repository. You set couple of folders in this wizard I mentioned a couple of times. For example, where the application itself located, and where this artifact folder, build or dist or whatever, depends on the structure. And then you count 3, 2, 1, or maybe a bit longer countdown, depending on how complex is your application, how much time it takes to actually build it. Bam, your app is online, distributed globally over the world. And Azure Static Web App will give you a test hostname, something like couple of random words, .staticwebapps.net. So you can start with this one, and of course you can always add your custom domain, custom hostname for free. Next, how to. What does it take to deploy a new version from you as a web front-end developer? Step number 1. You created new code, you push it to the code repository. And you know what? There is no step 2. It's all happening automatically for you. So you push the code to the repo, and in a few moments, again depending on how long your application is building, you get your project distributed over global servers of Azure. Of course, under the hood there are many things happening. So after you merged your changes to the main branch, the branch you track using after you scaffolded Static Web App out of this, so it ends up in your repo. And then if you talk about GitHub, it starts workflow, and it runs this workflow generated, by the way, for you using GitHub Actions. So in that sense, you don't need to have any kind of knowledge of how GitHub Actions are working and how to build your own workflow. You can always fine-tune this, but the starter is generated for you automatically. Among other tasks, it of course builds the project for you, but before this it recreates all the environment, it does npm install, etc, etc. So after your project was built, it set off some static files like HTML, your JavaScript bundle, your CSS bundle, again depending on particular architecture of your application. And yeah, the GitHub carefully passes this to Azure to distribute over the global servers infrastructure. And by the way, you can have it with Azure products for storing code, Azure repositories and Azure pipelines instead of GitHub. So it's up to you. Third how-to is how to develop locally. I mentioned that if we talk about API endpoints, and for some web front-end projects, it's absolutely good idea to have some maybe quite simple API included and to have it as a part of the project itself, especially if you talk about authentication. Local development is a must. We have another great helper tool called Azure Static Web Apps CLI, Command Line Interface. It helps us with the web server itself, and of course this is a web server which is ready to serve, for example, single page applications, and it actually supports all the routing supported by Azure Static Web App itself, like on the server. So in that sense, it emulates the behavior. Same with authentication and authorization. You have convenient mocks to debug this on your local machine, and the same with API endpoints. There is proxying to Azure Functions runtime on your machine, so you have full control over the every single feature of your application. How to start with this tool? Well, it all starts with npm install, right? And it's a good idea to install it globally. And then you have a command called SWA available in your terminal. So SWA start, and you might want to pass a couple of parameters to explain better how your application is structured. For example, for the classic React application created using CRA, Create React App library, it will look something like that. We point to the development server of the React. We also specify build command, so it starts, the whole environment starts with one single command like that, and also we point to the API folder. Okay, enough words. Let's check this in action. So after all, I'm proud to present my project called BPM Techno. Here is the application itself, and you see I registered domain bpmtech.no, so it's BPM Techno, and let's just check how that works. To test this, I have a sample on YouTube, and you'll find the link to this video on GitHub repo. So let's start some music I produced, and we can start listening. Cool. So yeah, it takes only a few seconds to analyze the sound, and now it tries to analyze my speech, and I don't think that I have some good BPMs, beats per minute, in my narration. So just don't look at the current numbers, but it identified BPM very correctly for the music sample, and it really shows the power of current web technologies. So it's pure web frontend, JavaScript, web APIs, direct input from the laptop's microphone to JavaScript code, and then some analysis and calculations. I'm super happy with the state of the web these years. What's next? So this is a classical web front-end application with a small piece of backend where we can vote, or like all DJs can vote. Is it correct BPM? Was it discovered correctly or not? And let's check what happens on clicking this button. Yes, it's a very optimistic message. It appears immediately, and we see that actual request went also successfully. If we check the API, you see it's bpmtech.no/API/feedback, and this is the only API in endpoint I have so far, and it also hosted on Azure Static Web Apps, and it's created using JavaScript, so that means that it's in Node.js. Okay, let's have a brief look on the application code. And this is more or less classical React application, and I just want to show the build script because it's important to have the command to build, how to build the application itself in package.json. Actually, this is information for Azure Static Web Apps, how to take your source code and build artifacts ready for deployment on the servers. So I build the application itself and also service worker. What else I want to show you here? Let's have a look at the workflow file for GitHub Actions. It was created automatically. You don't have to understand how that works. You don't have to understand what's going on here. It's YAML for GitHub Actions. Again, explaining to GitHub when and what to do. And here you'll find the information you were asked while scaffolding this Azure Static Web App resource. Actually, just location of some folders in your app. Yeah, this file will be automatically created and added to your repo after you connected your front-end repo with Azure Static Web App. So you don't have to do anything here. And yeah, let's also have a look at the API itself. So it's located in API folder, how configured here, and the endpoint itself called feedback. Okay, and this is JavaScript code for Node.js runtime. And as you see, it's running locally on my machine currently, thanks to the command you've seen on the slides, SWA start and some parameters. So if we check this address, what's here, it's a live server attached to the code we generated using npm build. And you can also start listening it here. And what's even cooler, this is like no magic at all. This is just live web server, but which supports all the routing. But also, and yeah, now it's good time moment to demonstrate this. It also spins up Azure Functions runtime locally, so you can test and debug everything locally. So you see, it all happens locally. But yeah, of course, the data from this endpoint also goes to database. So if I were offline, of course, this will partially fail, let's say like this. The function itself will work, but it will not be connected to the database, which is in the cloud. Let's have a look on the repo itself. It's available, it's open source. Please feel free to fork it, clone it, do whatever you want with this code. What I want to show you, and by the way, the demo flow I will partially run through now is very well explained right in README file, so you can always reproduce this demo of Azure Static Web Apps features yourself for this or your personal project. For example, to educate your teammates on awesome functions of this service. So I explained how to start with your local dev server and how to deploy. Well, there is not so much to let's start from here. Automatic deployment on code change. As I mentioned in my slide, you just create your code, you update your code, you push it to the repo, and Static Web Apps does everything else for you. Let's just give it a try. Let me stop my dev server and let's change something in the application. Let's just make the change quite visible so we immediately understand that the data is a fresh one. For example, let's take something from app.js. Maybe, what about renaming? What about BPM Techno to BPM Disco? Yeah, let's make it as a temporary name for the application, and we'll see it on the front page. Let's make sure that we didn't change anything important. No. Okay, now we can add and commit this. Let's make sure that it's somehow temporary, so I will not forget to rename this again. And push. It's happening. Yes, and well, what's left? We just only have to wait. You see that on actions section of my repo, this commit appeared almost immediately, and now it started the whole build process somewhere on GitHub using GitHub Actions. So it builds my application, and it starts not from npm run build, it's way earlier, so it recreates all the environment, it installs Node modules, etc, etc. So building the application itself is just on the very top of all the actions performed for us automatically. But you see, this is okay way for the changes going straight to the main branch, which we set as the branch to monitor, to track in Azure Static Web Apps while we were creating this resource. And maybe it's not applicable for, let's say, more important and more fragile changes when you want to test something before pushing this to the main production branch, to the main production deployment slot. How can we get some temporary like storage, temporary address? Super easy. We again do our code in a separate branch of our code repo. We again push it to this branch and we create pull request. And so nothing new here, nothing surprising, let's say. To save our time, I created this branch in advance and I created pull request in advance. I called this new feature, and it's about changing background of my application. Yeah, I'm not sure that I want to put it to production. I want to ask opinion of my friends and see it in action for the first time myself. And right after we have pull request pending on GitHub, we immediately have another parallel build workflow started using the same workflow file, but for another location, another test one. So what actually happens? Azure Static Web Apps created separate environment for us. So we can see this new version on a separate domain, separate host name. You see, maybe it's not looking that good. Maybe I will just close this pull request. But for now, if we go to Azure portal, to this BPM counter resource I created, we see this staging environment here, staging or pre-production, you name it. And by the way, if I merge this pull request to the master branch, this staging environment will disappear completely, and the code we had here, this one with black background, will end up in main environment. So this will end up in my, let's say, production domain. Very convenient to test something and then to decide, will it go to main branch, to production, or you just cancel this. What's next? Let's also test some features related to routing. So you see that this is React application, and how the single page application is working. You actually redirect all failed navigation requests to the index location. Let's test this in action. For example, we have about section. If we type it in the URL, you see the application didn't show you 404, so it just shows you corresponding section of the website. Why is it happening? All thanks to support of navigation fallback in the special file we have to create and push to the code repo. I will show you its name and syntax. Yeah, it's let's say system name static web app.config.json, and it's all configuration about all kinds of routing for the application itself. So for example, which rule worked this time is navigation fallback. So you see that we asked static web apps runtime to redirect all failed requests to index.html. All, but not all actually, because we have some exclusions. And if we try to reach out some non-existing pick in the images folder, we will see another story. So this will be not redirected, and this will show us custom 404 page. Why is it custom? How did we set this up? Thanks to another rule we have in the same file, and I'm talking about this one. Yeah, so we asked to redirect all 404 error messages to the page we created in advance. It's super convenient to organize all kinds of routing. For example, it could be regular redirect. For example, I had the name of page about project as about me, but then I decided to make it less personal, and now it's about project itself. But still, some people have this old link, so I just set this server-side routing. So where to put this file in your code? Any location which is under application folder, and it's important that you don't have to actually have this file in your distribution, in your build, in your public folder. Maybe it's even a good idea to have it somehow private, so you don't need to actually deploy this to have this as a part of public distribution. No, you just keep it in your source code. And of course, the repo itself could be private, so no problems with that. Part of the routing engine of Azure Static Web Apps is helpers for authentication. For many front-end projects, it's enough to have any form of authentication and authorization as a part of services provided by identity providers like Twitter, like GitHub, like Azure Active Directory, so-called social logins. And it's the case for my project. And by the way, I didn't start building this user account page yet, so it's now for only in demo mode. So how will this help? How will Static Web Apps help us in that sense? Well, actually, it provides all this ecosystem for us, and we can just use it instead of creating our own login page, instead of creating our own I don't know, database where we store user information and logins, and instead of writing of course a bunch of code related to this stuff, we just say, okay, hey folks, this page should be accessible only for authenticated users. This page, like account in the example you see on the screen, or this page, which is like more admin, should be only available for the roles called administrator. And authenticated is so-called built-in role for Azure Static Web Apps, and this role is for everyone who was authenticated by any kind of social provider. while administrator is my custom role I created. I will show you where and how. And to ask people to log in, you just redirect them to the special location. It's part of so-called system folder .oauth, which is available for every project you deploy on Azure Static Web Apps. Yeah, so this folder and all URLs based on this folder are for you automatically. You don't have to do anything by hands. So you, for example, you want to organize login with Twitter, and let me just demonstrate how that works. Let's return to home page. As I mentioned, user account is not ready yet, so this is just part of about page. We scroll it here. Yeah, /account, and according to the routing rule, it's available only for authenticated people. And thanks to another rule in the same file, thanks to this one, 401, we redirected to our login page I created, and on login people can choose to go for Twitter, and then they will end up on this URL, or GitHub. Let's go for Twitter. I was already logged in on Twitter, so this will not ask me any password. Yes, but Azure will ask me for consent to send my personal information, which is Twitter handle in that case, to my application. Okay, I grant consent, and now if I go to my account again, my imaginary account, okay, I'm logged in, and by reaching out, by sending fetch request to another endpoint of .oauth family of endpoints called /me, you can get all the information about authenticated user. Of course, you can build some UI logic based on that. For logging out, you redirect people to that kind of URL, again part of .oauth folder. And also all requests to API endpoint, they have special header. Let me show you how that looks. Yes, it's called XMS client principal, so you can parse it on your server side to get information about user authentication data. This is, let's say, basic authentication, and to create role-based one, you go to portal and you assign users roles. So I created user called webmaxru on GitHub, and it has an administrator role. This is a custom role I created. And yeah, a user has to accept assignment of this role by clicking some unique link you will get after you invite them. And then after they log in, they will also have this particular role as a list of the roles here in you. That was the demo and the last how-to for today. How to continue learning about Azure Static Web Apps to deploy your own project to the cloud. We have awesome set of step-by-step guides dedicated to Azure Static Web Apps, in particular as a part of Microsoft Learn website. So there you will find instructions from about how to implement this or that feature in a very simple, easy to follow way. Also, official documentation of static web apps, where you find all the details about every single piece of functionality, every single piece of the features we have as a part of static web apps. And of course, the demo we just went through. Please clone it, fork it, deploy it, play with it, break it, and give me feedback how it works for you. How to give me feedback? Well, it's super simple. Let's stay connected. Here is my email, maximsalnikov@microsoft.com, and Twitter, my direct messages are open, so just send me a message. And of course, let's stay connected on LinkedIn. That's it. Thank you very much.